Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something really ambitious. We are distilling over 500 years of incredible, pulse-pounding history into a single story of raw strategy, unforgiving geography, and one absolutely unyielding idea. We are looking at the epic rise and the tragic fall of the Maratha Empire.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is, without a doubt, one of history's greatest David versus Goliath stories. We aren't just talking about some minor, localized rebellion here. We're talking about everyday local farmers and regional warriors who literally banded together to dismantle the dominance of massive, deeply established empires. So how does something like that even happen?
Section 1. The Birth of Swarajya.
To understand how this grassroots uprising actually worked, we really have to look at the 17th century landscape. Geography is so often the silent hero of history, and man, it definitely takes center stage here. The Deccan Plateau and those towering Sahyadri Mountains formed a natural rugged fortress. For outside invaders, these steep peaks and dense forests were an exhausting, impenetrable wall. But for the locals, it was the ultimate protective shield. This specific jagged landscape is exactly what made their legendary guerrilla warfare, striking lightning fast and then just vanishing into the hills, actually possible.
But here's the thing. A fortress is pretty much useless without a real cause. And for them, that cause was Swaraj. Swaraj translates to absolute self-rule. And it wasn't just some temporary political goal, it was a deeply ingrained, almost spiritual mantra of independence. This fire was originally lit in a young Shivaji by his mother, Jizabai. She didn't just read him normal bedtime stories. She instilled this unshakable belief that they absolutely had to rule their own land. It was this one unifying idea that would go on to outlive kings and survive for centuries.
Section 2. Defying the empires.
So with the rugged landscape acting as his shield, Shivaji stepped up to defy the mighty Mughal Empire. And this brilliantly illustrates the staggering contrast between the two forces. Picture this. The Mughal army was a colossal machine. Massive, heavily armored, but incredibly slow and bogged down by these huge vulnerable supply chains. On the flip side, the Maratha forces were agile, stealthy, and traveled super light. Up in those steep, winding mountain passes of the Deccan, the sheer size of the Mughal army wasn't his strength at all. It was actually a fatal weakness. The Marathas basically used the element of surprise to just exhaust and deplete their giant enemy. Now, Shivaji didn't just rely on hit-and-run tactics. The guy was an absolute master of psychological warfare and strategic deception. Take, for example, his incredibly tense encounter at Pratapgarh with Afzal Khan. Khan was this towering, ruthless general from the Bijapur Sultanate. Under the guise of a peaceful diplomatic meeting, Khan fully planned to crush Shivaji. But Shivaji came prepared. He wore hidden armor and concealed a bog knock, literally tiger claws, right in his hand. When Khan made his move, Shivaji deflected and struck back, instantly taking out the enemy's leadership. He won that day through pure intelligence and preparation, not just brute force.
But listen, you can't win every single battle forever, right? That brings us to 1665 and the Treaty of Purandar. Facing a frankly overwhelming Mughal force led by Mirza Raja Jai Singh, Shivaji had to make a painfully difficult strategic choice. To preserve his core forces and avoid total annihilation, he agreed to surrender 23 of his prized forts to Aurangzeb. On paper, it looked like a massive defeat, but as we'll see, it was actually a highly calculated step back. Right after that treaty, Shivaji was invited to the Mughal court in Agra, only to be deeply insulted and thrown under house arrest by Aurangzeb. And what follows? It plays out exactly like a Hollywood heist movie. Surrounded by heavily armed guards, Shivaji executes this brilliant psychological escape. Step 1. He feigns a really severe illness. Step 2. Claiming he needs to cure his illness, he starts sending these massive baskets of sweets and alms to local priests every single day. Naturally, the guards check them carefully at first, but you know how it goes. They eventually get lazy. Step 3. Shivaji and his son literally slip into the baskets and get carried right out past the oblivious guards. It was a stunning, daring escape that left Aurangzeb completely humiliated. Now, what's really interesting about all of this is that Shivaji wasn't just some brilliant guerrilla warrior. He was a visionary statesman. In 1674, he crowned himself Chhatrapati, officially founding a sovereign state. He set up the Ashtapradhan, which was an 8-minister cabinet to govern efficiently. He built a robust justice and revenue system, and incredibly, he saw the long-term strategic value of controlling the coastline, so he built massive coastal forts like Sindhudurg, which rightly earned him the title of the Father of the Indian Navy. Sadly, all those relentless campaigns took a huge toll, and Shivaji passed away in 1680. What followed was a brutal 27-year war of independence. Emperor Aurangzeb marched south with his massive army, determined to wipe the Marathas off the map. Shivaji's son, Sambhaji, was captured and horrifically martyred in 1689 after totally refusing to yield. You'd think this would break them, right? Actually, scratch that. It did the exact opposite. It ignited an unstoppable fire. Through the fierce leadership of his second son Rajaram and later the incredible tactical brilliance of Maharani Tarabai, the empire miraculously survived. By 1707, a broken, completely exhausted Aurangzeb died in the Deccan, his life's mission an utter failure.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Peshwa expansion.
So with the Mughals now severely weakened, the Maratha power dynamic shifted in a huge way. The role of the Peshwa, or prime minister, became the real center of power, kicking off with a master strategist named Balaji Vishwanath. He pulled off 3 incredible diplomatic masterstrokes. First, he managed to unite the warring Maratha factions. Second, he secured this monumental treaty with the fragile Mughal court. And third, through that exact treaty, he gained the rights to collect massive taxes known as the Chauth and Sardashmukhi across vast territories. Practically overnight, this flooded the empire's treasury and officially stamped their political dominance across India.
To manage all this crazy rapid growth, the Peshwas set up a confederacy, delegating immense power to some fierce regional commanders. You had the Scindias taking Gwalior, the Holkars and Indore, the Bhonsles governing Nagpur, and the Gaikwads controlling Baroda. This decentralized system was a total game-changer for lightning-fast military expansion across the subcontinent. But, as we're going to see, it also subtly planted the dangerous seeds of internal division because these commanders grew incredibly powerful in their own right.
This expansion reached its absolute peak under Peshwa Bajirao I. The man was an undefeated military genius who famously envisioned striking at the very trunk of the withering Mughal tree. His rallying cry, Delhi Chalo, march to Delhi. His lightning-fast cavalry campaigns stretched the empire all the way from Attic in the north to Cuttack in the east. For a brief, shining moment, the Maratha Empire was the undisputed master of the Indian subcontinent.
But that leads us into Section 4, the tragedy of Panipat.
The thing is, reaching the absolute top means you suddenly have a massive target on your back. And this brought on a devastating invasion from the Afghan ruler Ahmad Shah Abdali. When the Marathas marched north to meet Abdali, they made some absolutely critical strategic blunders. First, their previous aggressive expansions had alienated vital local allies like the Rajputs and Jats, leaving them completely politically isolated up north. Second, they totally abandoned their agile guerrilla routes. Their army marched as this massive, slow-moving city, completely bogged down by thousands of non-combatants and heavy artillery. Finally, they utterly underestimated Abdali, who brilliantly trapped them, cutting off all their supply lines. Before the battle even started, the Maratha army was literally starving.
The climax of this horrific trap was the Third Battle of Panipat. On January 14, 1761, a desperate, starving Maratha army clashed with Abdali's massive forces. The turning point? The young Maratha commander, Vishwasrao, was killed by a stray bullet, and sheer panic just swept through the ranks. It wasn't just a military defeat, it was an absolute slaughter. An entire generation of leadership and seasoned soldiers was wiped out in a single afternoon. The psychological blow was so crushing that the reigning Peshwa literally died of heartbreak shortly after hearing the news.
And now, Section 5, the final stand.
You know, the Maratha spirit was entirely built on resilience. Out of the literal ashes of Panipat rose this young, brilliant leader, Peshwa Madhavrao. Instead of just blindly rushing in for revenge, he executed a highly calculated, frankly miraculous comeback. Step 1, he stabilized the south and rebuilt the shattered treasury. Step 2, he crushed regional rivals, like the Nizam of Hyderabad, completely restoring their military reputation. Step 3, he successfully marched right back north, reclaiming their lost dominance. But tragically, just as the empire was finally breathing again, Madhavrao died of an illness at only 27 years old, and that left a massive, massive power vacuum.
So the crucial point is how this vacuum was exploited. Enter the British East India Company. Seeing all these Maratha commanders squabbling for power, the British deployed their incredibly effective divide-and-rule tactics. The downward spiral really kicked off with the Treaty of Surat in 1775, when a rogue Maratha leader actually asked for British military help to take the throne, a fatal internal betrayal. Now sure, the Marathas rallied for a stunning victory at Wadgaon in 1779, but the infighting just didn't stop. By 1802, a weak Peshwa essentially pawned off the empire's independence in the Treaty of Bassein just to save his own seat. After a series of final Anglo-Maratha wars, the once mighty empire officially fell in 1818.
So the geopolitical entity of the Maratha Empire officially ceased to exist, swallowed whole by British rule. But you really have to ask yourself, did it actually end there? Think about the core of this entire explainer. The concept of Swaraj, that fierce, unyielding demand for absolute self-rule that was birthed way back in the rugged Sahyadri Mountains. Even though the empire itself fell, did that powerful Maratha legacy of Swaraj plant the ultimate seeds for India's modern fight for independence? It's a fascinating echo of history, isn't it? It just goes to show us that while empires may inevitably fall, a truly powerful idea can outlive them all.